Hello, Professor Kentley here. Welcome back to my advanced writing course. In this video, I'm going to say a little bit more about APA, MLA, Chicago styles, and some other aspects of citing sources. For the final paper, you should use some sources, of course. Professional or academic sources, preferably academic sources, especially for most of you if you are a third or fourth year student. You can use MLA, Chicago, APA, or any other style that you want to use, any style that's appropriate for the kind of paper that you're doing in my class. And I will just point out a few things. In my book, I have a brief guide to APA and the Chicago parenthetical style. For other systems, go search my website. I have a style guide. I have a complete style guide for APA on my website. A very complete guide to APA. Although it's the older APA 6 or 7, whatever. I've got a pretty complete guide to the newer MLA 8. And I've got guides for Chicago, especially the Chicago parenthetical style, that is parentheses, author date, author year in parentheses within the text. That's the more formal Chicago style, as well as the Chicago footnote and endnote style. Very brief guide, I think, for IEEE for engineering. For other systems, Google it. You can find good sources online for using your citation system that you prefer. I'll just point out some different kinds of sources and formatting things you should be aware of. So I'll first go through APA, the APA guide in my book, and comment on MLA and other systems. In-text citation. So in any citation system, you're using APA, MLA, that is a parenthetical system that's used in humanities or social sciences. You can mention the author in the sentence grammar. So for example, a recent applied phonology text by Yavash, parentheses 2011, so the date in parentheses. Or I could background the author or authors by putting that all in parentheses. A recent study by Nevalainen and Tragot, 2012, notes that. Or I can mention, if it's two authors, I put and in the Nevalainen and Tragot in the text, in the sentence, or in parentheses, I use that at symbol. Nevalainen and Tragot, 2012. In APA. Now in MLA, I don't think you use the ampersand or at symbol. So look at these examples in my book in the section on APA for examples of citing different kinds of sources and how multiple sources are cited if you're using multiple sources. Again, for APA, in the newer APA, for 6 or more authors, you use et al., like the first name, like Smith et al., for the in-text citation, and then all of the names are going to be listed in the end references. Now, older APA, it's for 3 or more authors, Smith et al. For other citation systems, it's 3 or more authors. So, for example, if you're using Chicago or MLA, 3 or more authors, like Smith et al., if it's 3 authors or more. In my class, even if you're using APA, I don't care. You can use et al. For 3 or more. So, authorless sources or undated sources. Now, first of all, if you are in a field that uses a lot of electronic sources, a lot of media sources, a lot of sources with no authors or dates, think about whether it's better to use the MLA or Chicago styles, because those styles are better suited for those kinds of sources. You could do those in APA, but it starts to get a little messy or clunky. So especially in APA, I think systems in general use ND for no date. Like if it's a website that has no date, maybe you're using a government website for official information and there's no date at the bottom of the website, but ND. Sometimes you use NA for no author. Now for citing periodical articles, like newspaper and magazine articles, it's also a little bit weird in APA. APA distinguishes between journal articles versus non-academic periodical publications. So you see this in the end references, by the way. So usually in the end references, you put a year in parentheses in the APA. But if it's a popular publication, a periodical, a magazine, or newspaper, you put like the date in the year, like August 8th, 2008, or September 2008. You put the whole date in the end references in APA, only in APA. It's kind of weird. Okay, back to authorless, anonymous sources, or sources with no date. In APA, well, it might be a reference work, and you can put the title of the reference work instead of the author, like the example I have here, Oxford Phrasal Verbs Dictionary, 2006. And in the end references, you would start with, there's no author, so Oxford Phrasal Verbs Dictionary. That's how the reference starts in the end references. And articles, like periodical articles with no author, in the APA, you would cite them by abbreviating the title. Let's say you've got a newspaper article about a renegade octopus escaping its zoo in New Zealand. That really happened because they're smart little things. Quotation marks, renegade octopus, comma, 2016. And Smith, comma, ND, no date. And in the end references, if there's no author, you would just start the end reference with the title of the article, Renegade Octopus, and the full title. And in the end references, you would have like Smith, first name, and instead of the year, like 2012, you put ND for no date, for there's no year available. Or here we have Environmental Protection Agency, there's no author, but an agency instead is the author. So I'd use the agency name, Environmental Protection Agency, in place of the author in the in-text citation and then in the end references. Direct quotations, in most any system, you should put the page number where it came from. So for example, in APA, Marion, 1997, page 34. And it's like that also in other systems like MLA, Chicago, and such. Same is true for citing, charts, graphs, pictures. In the APA, one thing I tend to do, sometimes you cite something as kind of a popular example. Let's say I'm writing a linguistics paper, and there's a phrase from The Simpsons. I don't want to list The Simpsons as a source. It's not like a source. It's just an example, where an example comes from, but it's not an academic source. So what I will do is maybe in a footnote, I'll use just a footnote, and it's not in the end references. It's not a formal source citation, just a footnote, and list the program, give information about the program, where it came from. If I'm citing a quote from Homer Simpson and I'm for a paper on linguistics, and I'm talking about popular uses of some expression as a linguist, and such. And likewise, if I'm just citing some popular example like that. So notice, look at the book section for end references are done in APA or Chicago, or if you're using MLA, go to my website and look for MLA on my website, the class website. I talked about this already in a previous video. Notice how multiple authors are done in different systems. If you have a work with multiple authors, notice how they are done in the different systems. Look at that section in my book or my website. Books and such, academic journal articles, popular periodicals. Again, I've got that in my book and my website. Again, electronic sources, undated sources, authorless sources. In various systems, it's going to be common to put the title of an article and then the name of the website. Or if it's the name of a specific web page, that's like an article title, and then the name of the whole website, who does the website, like the title of a particular page and then the name of the whole website, that's like a title, and then retrieved from, and then your URL. Now in the older MLA 7, you would also put the date when you downloaded something, and I think maybe also in Chicago. nowadays in the newer MLA and also in APA, you don't need to put the date you retrieved it unless it's a website that might change. If the website contents are likely to change, then you could put the download date. So no date or author, newspapers, etc. Take a look at that. I've also got Chicago here in my book, the formal Chicago system. Again, very similar principles apply here in terms of how you cite sources in the text and handling different kinds of sources. Now, at the end of the section on Chicago, and also the next section, I've got this section called Non-English Sources. So take a look at both of those. If you are citing sources that are written in Korean or other languages, if they're written in a language other than English. I've got an example for Chicago at the end of the section on Chicago style in my book. If it's the title of a book, you would romanize it. Now for Korean, there are different ways of romanizing it. I don't care which one you use, or just attempt your own romanization. That's fine, whatever. Now in linguistics papers, if you're writing a linguistics papers, you have to use the Yale romanization for Korean, which I think is kind of weird. I won't be so picky about that, but if you are writing a paper for a linguistics class, your professor will want you to use the Yale romanization for Korean, where is written O-E and so on, and other things are a little weird. Anyway, you would romanize it, and then in square brackets, you put a translation. And I've got an example in the book here at the end of the section on Chicago. Now, sometimes if you're writing for an audience that's all Korean, you could just put the title in Korean and then a translation in square brackets. But for my class, you should translate it. The next section is also specifically on non-English sources. And I think these are examples for Chicago also. But you can adapt the same principle to whatever system you're using, whether you are using MLA, APA, or Chicago. The title of a book, again, will be romanized, and then in square brackets, you put a translation of the title. If it's an article online, an academic research journal article, a periodical article from a magazine or newspaper, you would romanize the title, and if it's in Chicago or MLA, put in quotation marks, and then in square brackets, you put the translation. And you follow the same style as whatever system you're using, Chicago, MLA, APA, whatever. And then the name of the periodical. Now, it could be just Donga Science, you don't need to transliterate or translate that. But if it's if the publication, like the magazine or journal, has some regular name, like it's Korean for, International Journal of Korean Linguistics. Okay, romanize it and then put a translation in square brackets, International Journal of Korean Linguistics. Just making that up. But you do that. If the title of the magazine or research journal needs to be translated, then you would romanize it and then put a translation in square brackets. But if it's something like Donga Ilbo, well, you don't need to translate that. A commonly known newspaper or magazine or Donga Science, you don't need to translate that. Just romanize, put the normal name. Finding and managing sources. So I've done a video, I think previously, on finding sources in Google Scholar. So also refer to the next section in my book on finding and managing sources and finding academic sources in Google. Those are the next sections in this chapter on using sources. If you expect to be writing in a lot of academic papers, and especially if you are going to become a researcher, or if you're going to go to graduate school for a master's or PhD, I strongly recommend also using a reference manager, a software that works with your Microsoft Word or your LibreOffice program, or now I think they work with Google Docs. Zotero, Mendeley will install a plugin to work with your word processing program. And you can save them from a search. But of course, if you want to pay money to Microsoft, you can use their EndNotes program or whatever. And that only works with Microsoft Word. The advantage of the free programs Zotero and Mendeley is this. They're free. And so there's the referencing program itself, and it works with your browser and installs a plugin. You can download, like if you do a Google Scholar search, you can download the citation from Google Scholar to your reference manager, especially for Zotero. And I haven't used Mendeley much, but I think it works the similar way. You can save it to your reference manager, and your reference manager will keep them all stored for you. And then there is an extra plugin that works with your MS Word or your LibreOffice, your word processor, that you activate, and it works with the referencing program. And so I'm typing, I click a little button to insert a reference in my LibreOffice and find it, and it inserts the reference in the text for me. And then when I say create the end references, it'll automatically generate them, and it works really nice. If you're in engineering, you should probably learn LaTeX or LaTeX and the BibTeX program that works with LaTeX for doing this. I haven't learned that yet, but engineers and chemists use LaTeX for writing papers if you're in graduate school. Again, the next section is on finding academic sources in Google, and I think I did put up an old video about that earlier for you, and that's in the book with some examples. Tips for searching Google, especially Google Scholar, for academic papers and for managing them. So please look at that. Okay, for your papers, I don't care which style you use. Use and practice whatever you're using in your field, the field of the paper that you're writing. Now, you might be tempted to go online and use some kind of a citation generator. There are some websites where you can type in some of the information and it will create the reference for you, the in-text citation, and then the end reference or works cited citation or entry. That's fine, but I think it's better just to do it manually so you kind of learn how the system works. If you're writing a paper in a field where you use APA or Chicago or MLA or whatever, it's best to actually type it yourself just to learn how it works. So, and sometimes you'll find stuff that the online citation generator website can't really do for you. So it's better to learn how it works so you can type it yourself, especially when that website, that citation generator website, can't do it for you. It might not be able to retrieve a fairly obscure or lesser known journal and do the formatting for you. I have also seen cases where, like when the new version of MLA came out, and one of my students was trying to use it for doing the new MLA, and it was getting the format wrong, really, really wrong, really messed up. And so you might want to use a somewhat older system if you're having that problem. If it's not doing the MLA 8 right for you, have it do the MLA 7. Although now that's not a problem. But if you're using the newest APA version, a new APA version came out a couple of years ago. But anyway, these websites, these citation generator websites, they're not perfect. They sometimes make mistakes, and they will sometimes have difficulty with sources that are harder to find, maybe less commonly known journals, especially if it's like if you're using a Korean journal article that's published in Korea, or if it's in another language, you might have trouble with that. You might not do it right. And other kinds of sources, electronic sources, online sources, it might have trouble doing the right formatting. Take a look at my book. I've got some guides in my book for MLA and APA, or you go to my website and search for Chicago or APA or MLA. There are guides on my website for doing those systems, brief guide for IEEE for engineering and for a couple of other systems, I think. If you are citing a source that is not written in English, that's okay. Go to my book. Oh, I've also got Chicago in my book here. Non-English sources, that's section 7 in this chapter on using sources. If it's not in English, if it's another language, well, if it's in a language that uses the Roman or Latin alphabet, what you would do is in brackets put a translation. So you'd put the original title and then put a translation in brackets, square brackets. And if it's in, say, Korean or Chinese, something that is in a non-Latin writing system, the standard practice is to Romanize it. Now, for Korean, there are different Romanization systems. I don't care which one you use. If you attempt your own Romanization that's reasonably accurate, I don't care. But whether you're using APA or Chicago or MLA, I think the common thing is to kind of Romanize, say the title of an article, Romanize it, and then put a translation in square brackets. Then the name of the journal article, and maybe that needs to be Romanized and then translated in square brackets, or the title of a book, Romanized and then put in square brackets. Now, if your audience, your readers know Korean, you could just do it without Romanization. But for my class, you should Romanize it. For Chinese, you can use, of course, the pinyin system for Romanizing things. And otherwise, do it the same thing. Now, in Chicago, I have also seen people just directly translate the entire source citation and then put in Korean. That is the source citation, blah, 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 and then in Korean, meaning that the source is in Korean. I've seen that too. But for my class, you should see the Romanization example and adapt it to your MLA or APA or Chicago, whatever you're using. That is it for now on, I think, citing and using sources. Please look at those sections on the book. A lot of helpful stuff there. All right, that's it for now for this video. Hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.